Open a refrigerator anywhere in the world and you will probably find it. A bright orange bottle, sweet, fizzing, harmless. A drink so ordinary that no one ever stops to ask where it came from. It is one of the most recognizable soft drinks on the planet. Children grow up on it. It is advertised with sunshine and bright colors and laughter. And almost no one knows that it was invented inside one of the darkest moments in human history. In a country at war, by a factory that had been cut off from the rest of the world. This is the story of a drink that was born not out of joy, but out of desperation. The story of Fanta. To understand it, you have to go back to the years before the war, when an American company was quietly conquering Europe one bottle at a time. Coca-Cola by the 1930s was no longer just an American product. It was a global ambition, and nowhere was it more successful than in Germany. The company had established a German subsidiary, Coca-Cola GmbH, and by the end of the decade it was selling millions of bottles a year. The drink had become a familiar sight in German cafes, kiosks and homes. At the head of this operation stood a man named Max Keith. A German businessman, disciplined, intensely loyal, and almost obsessively devoted to the company he served. Keith believed in Coca-Cola the way other men believed in causes. He had built the German branch into one of the most profitable arms of the entire international company. But the world he had built his success on was about to come apart. By 1939, Europe was sliding into war, and the comfortable arrangement that fed his factories ran straight back across the Atlantic to a country that would soon be on the other side. The secret of Coca-Cola was never the bottling, it was the syrup. A concentrated formula mixed in the United States, shipped abroad, and added to carbonated water at local plants. Without that syrup, there was no Coca-Cola. The German factories could bottle, distribute, and sell, but they could not create the product itself. That came from America, and only from America. Then, in 1940, the supply line snapped. With the war intensifying and trade between the two nations collapsing under embargo, the shipments of syrup to Germany stopped. The most important ingredient in the entire operation simply could not get in. The lifeblood of the German Coca-Cola business was gone. For Max Keith, this was a catastrophe. He had hundreds of workers. He had bottling plants standing ready. He had trucks, distributors, contracts, an entire machine built to produce a drink he could no longer make. He faced a stark choice. He could let the factories fall silent and wait for a war to end that no one knew how long would last. Or he could find a way to keep the lights on. Keith refused to let the operation die. If he could not have Coca-Cola, then he would invent something else. Something that did not need a single ingredient from across the sea. But this was wartime Germany, and the country was sealing itself off. Resources were rationed. The good ingredients, real sugar, fresh fruit, anything of quality, were going to the war effort or simply vanishing from the market. Whatever Keith made would have to be built from whatever was left over, the scraps, the byproducts, the things other industries threw away. And so he turned to his chemists with an almost absurd instruction: make me a drink out of nothing. They went looking through the leftovers of German food production. What they found was not glamorous. There was whey, the watery byproduct left behind when milk is turned into cheese. A thin, sour liquid that most factories simply discarded. There was apple pomace, the crushed pulp, skins, and fibers that remained after apples had been pressed for cider. The dry residue at the bottom of the press. And when they could get it, there was beet sugar, the one sweetener still produced on German soil, though even that was strictly rationed. These were the raw materials, not a recipe so much as a list of things nobody else wanted. From this unlikely collection, Keith's team began to experiment. They blended, adjusted, tasted, and tried again. The goal was simple: make something a person would actually want to drink. What emerged was a sweet, fruity, golden-colored soda. It tasted nothing like Coca-Cola. It was its own thing entirely. Improvised, imperfect, but oddly pleasant. The recipe, by necessity, was never fixed. It shifted constantly depending on what byproducts were available that month, that season, that year. The drink you bought in one town might not taste the same as the one bought in another. Now the strange new creation needed a name, and the story of how it got one has become almost as famous as the drink itself. Keith reportedly gathered his team and told them to use their imagination, their fantasy, in German. One salesman seized on the word instantly. From fantasy. They took the first syllable, They shortened it, sharpened it, and arrived at something simple and memorable. They called it Fanta, a name born, fittingly, from a single word meaning imagination, because imagination was very nearly the only thing the factory had left. And then something remarkable happened. The improvised drink made from leftovers did not just survive, it sold. In a country starved of small comforts, where sweetness itself had become a luxury, a cheap fruity soda was a small miracle. People bought it eagerly. By the height of its wartime production, Fanta was selling in the millions of cases. The factory Keith had fought to keep alive was not just surviving, it was thriving. There is a detail here that says everything about the times. Sugar was so scarce and rationing so severe that many people reportedly did not drink Fanta at all. Instead, they used it as a sweetener, pouring it into soups and stews to add the flavor that wartime cooking had stripped away. A soft drink had become an ingredient in the kitchen. It is important to be clear about what this story is and what it is not. Fanta was created to keep a business running under a regime that the world would come to condemn. The German Coca-Cola operation continued throughout the war years, employing German workers, operating under the laws and conditions of the state around it. This is not a tale of heroism. It is a tale of a company surviving. Max Keith was, by most accounts, not driven by ideology, but by an almost stubborn loyalty to a single thing: the company. He was determined that, when the war ended, there would still be a business to hand back, and he was meticulous about it. Throughout the years of isolation, with no contact possible with the parent company in America, Keith reportedly kept careful records, guarding the operation's value as if it had only been borrowed. He was, in his own mind, a caretaker, holding the German branch in trust until the day the connection to America could be restored. That day came in 1945. The war ended. Germany lay in ruins, and the long-severed link across the Atlantic could finally be re-established. When representatives of Coca-Cola reached Max Keith, they found something they had not expected. The German operation was intact, the accounts were in order, and Keith was ready to hand it all back. For his loyalty across those isolated years, the company kept him on. He had preserved what most would have assumed was already lost. And there, in the wreckage of post-war Germany, sat a strange little wartime invention that had served its purpose. A drink made of scraps, named after imagination, that could easily have been discarded along with the rubble. For a time, it nearly was. With Coca-Cola syrup flowing once more, Fanta had no obvious reason to exist. The emergency was over. But the company did not throw it away. In the years that followed, Coca-Cola took the orphaned wartime brand, refined it, and slowly began to rebuild it. This time, with proper ingredients, real fruit flavors, and a clean new identity. By the 1950s, Fanta was relaunched and sent out into the wider world, stripped of its origins, reborn as a bright and cheerful soda. The wartime scraps were gone. The story behind them was quietly left behind. And so it spread across continents, into countless flavors, onto shelves and into refrigerators in nearly every country on Earth. A global brand sold to billions, almost none of whom had any idea where it had truly come from. The next time you hold one of those bright bottles, it is worth remembering what it once was. Not a product of sunshine and color, but of an embargo, a sealed-off nation, and a factory clinging to life by mixing together the things no one else wanted. Beneath the cheerful label sits one of history's quiet truths, that the most familiar things in our lives can carry the strangest, darkest pasts. How many of the everyday objects we never think twice about were born in a moment far heavier than we will ever guess?